Cold Wars that are heating up, and they're heating up everywhere. And so I just want to show you really a quick list because we can't, there's so much news along with these countries that we really can't go through them all. But China and U.S. is heating up, of course. We'll talk a little bit about that. China and India in a big way, two nuclear states. North Korea and South Korea are continuing to heat up. Egypt and Turkey even more so. And this is one of the biggest issues going on right now is between Egypt and Turkey, and we'll talk about some of that. Turkey and Greece, Egypt and Ethiopia over water, over the dam, the Renaissance Dam. Russia and Ukraine continue to heat up. I don't know if you know this, but Russia continues, their back troops continue to fire off and shoot at Ukrainians every single day. Somebody is killed or wounded over there. Lebanon and Israel, Hamas and Israel, of course, in Gaza, and Iran and Turkey and Israel. So these things, I know some of these are not surprising to you, but what I'm saying is they're not cold wars. They continue to heat up. They continue to change the Middle East. Just start off with, and we're just going to go through some of these briefly. This one is India and China. They've been going off for about the last year or two, actually longer than that, but they've been really heating up over the last year in particular, and even more so in the last couple weeks. 20 Indian troops were killed the other day, and the Chinese are kind of storming this area in India. Remember, Kashmir is a disputed area between these two countries, and they just will not back off and bring peace there. They don't like each other. Russia and China are building up a case in the UN to protect Iran from U.S. sanctions. And Trump is not going to let these sanctions go, which is another reason why we actually need to vote him in November. But Russia, remember, in Ezekiel 38 it says Russia will be a guard over them. And so Russia here is leading the way in being a guard over Iran, both militarily with weapons, with they're still building nuclear reactor over there in what we would call Elam, but is in it is near the Gulf there, the Persian Gulf. And of course China doesn't like the U.S. They really honestly don't like Russia, but they don't like the U.S. more, so they're frenemies, and they're ganging up on the U.S. and Israel at the UN. So that's what's happening there. The U.S. sends aircraft carriers to the South Pacific. Now remember, for the longest time, China built an island there in the South Pacific there, and it's really a stationary aircraft carrier. They put a land strip there or an airstrip there on the land, but the United States is saying, we're not going to give this up. Taiwan, of course, is there, and we're friends with them. And you know what China has been doing with Hong Kong? You've heard about that, where I think it's in 2025, I think China gains control over Hong Kong, but China just passed a security measure, and they got Hong Kong to pass it, that they will have security over Hong Kong now. And that's in effect. And some people are fleeing. The UK has said whoever has passports to the UK can flee to the UK. So China is being very bold here in these very daring times, where Russia is reaching out to try to get back to the Soviet Union. The Turks are reaching out, trying to gain back the Ottoman Empire. China is taking advantage of all the hate against the United States and pushing on Trump. They know Trump doesn't want a war. Trump is bold, and he's done some bold steps, but he doesn't want war, and they know it, and so they're pushing on him. But Trump is pushing back in some ways by sending aircraft carriers, sending F-35s to the Middle East, more to Israel, but these are United States aircraft based in the Middle East, and some are saying that they're getting a little bolder as well, the U.S., in what they're doing. We'll talk about that here in just a little bit. What else is happening? We're making Germany upset because President of the United States, Trump, wants 20,000 troops, 19 I think, removed from Germany. And this is what Chancellor Merkel said. She said, the U.S. may voluntarily relinquish its status as a world power, and Europeans must brace themselves for such a contingency, including by boosting their militaries. Now, Trump and Merkel have not been friends since the beginning. You remember Trump is telling the EU they're not paying their bills at the UN, they're not establishing enough for their own security, their own military. And now he's saying, well, if you're not going to do that, we're going to start pulling some of our troops home. Now, these troops probably, in fact, may not come home, because now, actually, Trump is talking to Poland. You remember maybe last year that Poland built a base and named it after Trump. So we're becoming more friends with Poland, which is helpful in the Baltic states and in Central Eastern Europe there to kind of ward off the Soviet Union issue. But so they might move these troops from Germany to Poland. We're just gonna have to wait and see how this plays out. But President Trump is continuing, and that makes Russia even angrier. Putin and Trump are not friends. They really have not gotten along. They tried, but they really haven't seen eye to eye. Trump knows exactly what Putin is up to. So we'll have to continue to see what happens there. Concerning the Egypt and Ethiopia thing, remember, Ethiopia is building one of the largest dams in the world. It's called the Renaissance Dam. And you remember the Nile actually flows north. So that water is flowing from Ethiopia and the hills and mountains around that area into through Sudan and into Egypt. And Egypt is very concerned that this is going to cut the water off or diminish it quite a bit. It's going to hurt the farming and all those things along the Nile. This is an ongoing dispute, and they were, there was talk of war here in the last couple of weeks. They're now saying that they may have, they're close to an agreement, but still, this is what happened last week. Egypt will be direct and clear in its action it will take. And in fact, the Egyptian parliament has already given President Sisi the power to do what he needs to stop this dam from affecting the Nile. So we'll see how this plays out. And I don't know if you know this, but in Isaiah 11, Isaiah 19, Ezekiel 30, the Nile River and the sea are dried up. It seems like there's something nuclear happens, or the Lord does it himself. Something happens there. If you read Isaiah 11 or 19 and Ezekiel 30, something happens to the Nile and the Red Sea along those areas in the tribulation, of course. That's still coming. But there's problems there now. Also, I think there's going to be this continued onward dispute between the area of Sudan and Ethiopia, because remember, that's Cush, and remember, Put is Libya. And Egypt really is not a part of that situation there as far as trying to be allies. However, Egypt is being pulled into this Libyan war because the Turks now are coming into Libya even more and more, and that really concerns Egypt. Egypt kicked out the Muslim Brotherhood, if you remember right. They're still there. I mean, kind of, but they were ahead of the government, and they were kicked out. The United States was a part of that. Now, Egypt is concerned about Turkey because Turkey is backed by the Muslim Brotherhood, and the Muslim Brotherhood is a very bad player in the Middle East. And so Egypt is warning the Turks and warning the rest of the Arabs, we need to stop the Turks here, because if they come into Egypt in mass, they're going to have problems. And we know that they do, because Ezekiel 38 says that they do. More on that a little bit in a little bit. Kim's sister in North Korea says that they're ready for armed action against the South. So that has heated back up. It calmed down for a while with President Trump, but we really knew that that wasn't going to last for very long, because the North Koreans and Kim is he's his own little animal, and you can't trust him as far as you can throw him. In the north of Turkey, in Georgia, and along the Black Sea there, Russia did a major exercise the other day with some tanks. And then a couple days later, I just saw this the other day, Azerbaijan and neighboring states got into some firefights. And so Russia is pushing their way into Georgia and one of the other states down here, and trying to cause a civil war there so that they could come in and take over. Remember that this was part of the Soviet Union, just north, all those Caucasus states north of Turkey and the Black Sea were all part of the Soviet Union. And Russia, Putin says one of the worst things that's happened in his lifetime is the fall of the wall, the Berlin Wall, and the fall of the Soviet Union. So there. Now, remember why these countries do these mass exercises. They do it to say, hey, we're here, and it gets the populations around them afraid. It gets the United States population afraid. We don't want war. We don't want any part of it. Hey, let's just get out of there. And yet, somebody has to be a deterrent, because you remember that's what happened with Hitler and Stalin and others. There really wasn't any deterrent for them for quite a while. And that's the issue with Putin. That's the issue with Khomeini and Iran, if he has his way, and others. They need to be stopped, because they will take over. In particular, they're going to take over the Middle East. Why is that key? Let me tell you something here. Putin, he has this map, and inside the map is Russia, and it goes down, this corridor goes down into the Middle East and circles the Middle East. And so Russia in that area there is the oil production states. And everybody outside that, every nation outside that to the east and the west are users. They're consumers. China is a consumer. Pakistan and these others are consumers. The whole Western Europe are consumers. That's why he's building the 2 pipelines, and that's why he wants more oil. Even though it hits zero, he still wants it, because that's where he gets most of his money. Russia makes most of their money from arms sales, from petroleum, that's number one, and gas and oil. And then they build nuclear sites and parts for other countries as well, including Iran and North Korea. So a major exercise there in Georgia. Jordan and Israel, this is, the reason I'm bringing this one up is because really Jordan is kind of this, they're kind of the spokesman. They're trying to be the spokesman for the Arab nations, saying, in the south, saying, Israel is not going to annex anybody over. They're going to annex the West Bank over our dead body. We'll get to that a little bit later. But watch what this Jordanian minister says. A military conflict with Israel should be a strategic option. If we don't die for Palestine and Jerusalem, what is the point of life? To be frank with you, now these are Sunnis, and to be frank with you, the Shiites believe basically the same thing. That's their ideology, that's their theology. And that is something very difficult to fight. You can only really fight that with force. Because even in a time of peace, their goal is to get rid of Israel and to take over, if they could, take over the world. Everybody's supposed to submit to them. So it doesn't matter. Now, Jordan is speaking this way, but they're very concerned about Iran. And Saudi Arabia and Egypt is trying to tone Jordan down. and saying, we need you to tone the Palestinians down, because Jordan has most of the Palestinian people. And let's accept Israel and work with the United States against Iran, because that's the major threat for them. And to be frank, Turkey is going to be one as well. Again, we'll talk about that again. In Sudan, which again is a portion of Cush down there in Ezekiel 38, they've been trying to make peace for the last 6 to 8 months. Remember, they had a civil war. Then they said, okay, we've got a peace treaty going, and they made a peace with some of the rebels and stuff. But you can see, according to this picture here, it's not going very well. Some people are saying Khartoum is the capital there. It looks like kind of a war zone or a place that's about ready to burst into civil war again. It's really a disaster. This is important to keep updated because Libya is a disaster and Sudan is a disaster. And these two places in particular have to be put together because they send troops to the Gog and Magog war. Syria even isn't really stabilized yet. It is more so. Russia and Turkey, which are the heads, I believe the heads, Russia is Magog and Turkey is Beth Togarmah and those. They are the powerhouses really in the Middle East right now. They are friends in Syria, frenemies. They don't like each other, but they're working with each other. And once they settle that Syria and then Libya and then Sudan, we can look for the Gog-Magog war in particular. But it is being placed. The pieces are there right now. It just needs to come together. Another Cold War that's heating up, Australia and China. United States' friend, Australia. Australia's new defense strategy unveils a significant strategic shift in foreign policy to meet new threats from China. And Prime Minister Morrison said the other day there's a storm cloud on the horizon. Most of the experts right now are saying China is the big player in the world right now. They're pouring all their money into defense and cyber tech and all those kinds of things, supersonic weapons. They say they have missiles to shoot down or to destroy our aircraft carriers. They mentioned that about a month ago, and our United States Navy says we're ready for them. But they're threatening our Navy, and they're threatening Australia. So Morrison has just okayed a budget for one of the biggest Australia defense strategy plans ever. So they're gearing up as well. So all these things continue to heat up. But let's get a little bit more particular into the Gog-Magog issue and what it's looking like in the Middle East. It's really interesting if you want to go look at Amir Safadi's update today. He did one at noon Central Time, 10 a.m. Pacific. You can find it on YouTube. And he does a good one. He talks about Turkey. He did mention that the Turks are supplying a lot of northern Syrians. We would call them ex-Al-Qaeda's, Sunni Al-Qaeda affiliates. They're bringing them now into Syria, but Russia's doing the same thing. And what Russia's doing is they've combined with Assad to transport their militias, some of their militias, into northern Africa as well, into Libya. So Russia's transporting these folks. Russia's transporting MiGs. Russia's transporting anti-aircraft systems, large ones, very big ones. And then about a month ago, Turkey, well, actually more than that, two months ago maybe, Turkey sent a bunch of UAVs over there, big drone aircraft, and they were destroying these big Russian air defense systems. And it set Russia on their heels, and Haftar, of course, who is Russia's friend, Putin's friend. Now, if there are Russians citizens on the ground, they're usually militias. There's called the Wagner or the Wagner group. It's like a private security firm, but they've got, it's a large firm, and they're mercenaries. Russia is transporting them over there, and they're fighting in certain areas in Libya. And then, of course, so only certain areas. But the militias are fighting with Haftar in the western section. I'll get to more of that in a second. But now Turkey is doing the same thing. Turkey is transporting these Al-Qaeda affiliates, Sunni rebels, in to fight for them. And so it is ramping up. It is not slowing down in Turkey. It's in Libya. Turkey has been able to put Russia and Haftar back on their heels. They took Tripoli back. They didn't have all of Tripoli, but they took all the area back. And now Turkey is about ready to jump into Sirte. Again, go back and look at Amir Safadi's update today. They're about ready to take back a stronghold just east of Tripoli. So here's just a picture of the Middle East again. Look where Libya's at, and Egypt and Sudan there. Those are the sections, Libya and Sudan especially, that are going to come in the Gog and Magog war, and northern sections of Ethiopia there. And I just want to take you to Libya just for a second to show you what is happening there. This is from Live UA Maps. You can see the purple area there that's where Turkey's forces are. And you can see the star there. And then in the orange, or the salmon color, are where the Haftar forces are. And you can see the Russian flag there. That Russian flag, where that Russian pennant is where Russia has decided to fly in their MiGs and take that air base right there. But again, Haftar had more area, but now Turkey is really on a rampage. And in fact, the other day, Turkey did a massive naval exercise that stretched from Libya all the way across the Mediterranean into near Cyprus. And so they are really showing force here, and it's a very concerning thing. Wagner, which is Russia's mercenaries, as well as Sudanese mercenaries, are in the oil fields near Arbari, which is near down where that pennant is. Now look at this, Sudanese mercenaries. So that's Kush. So some of those people, the Kushites, are already involved with the put here in Libya and alongside Russia in helping them work through this. What's going to happen in Libya is a really interesting question. Because again, we know, and we'll get to Syria in a minute, but we know that they've kind of calmed things down in Syria, but this is a big mess. Because Haftar has most of the land, most of the oil fields, and Russia's backing. But Turkey is very strong and very aggressive. And so how are they going to bring this together? This is to me, the most interesting chess match on the planet right now, because God says these two are going to come together somehow. But so GNA, which is backed up by Turkey, that's the blue, Army spokesman said, we hold Arab and foreign countries responsible for the presence of Russia and Syrian and African mercenaries, that's the Sudanese, and control of the oil fields. They're trying to protect them with red lines today. And so you've got these two masses coming together. As a Syrian observatory, the number of Syrian mercenaries moved to Libya has risen to more than 15,000. And that's just, I believe, on the Turkish side. Remember, Assad's bringing his own over as well. So, Libyan Foreign Ministry, the GNA, we thank the Sudanese security forces for their efforts to prevent the recruitment of their citizens to fight as mercenaries in Libya. See, this is really interesting, because this is exactly what the Bible says, that the Sudanese will bring, the Kushites will bring forces with the Libyans, and they're going to fight with Magog in that war against coming down into Israel and the Sinai Peninsula. So meanwhile, while that's happening in Libya, next door to Egypt, Egypt is very, very concerned. And you can see this picture here. They've amassed troops at the closest base on the Libyan and Egyptian border. And Sisi went over there, President Sisi went over there and made some bold statements and calling for all of the Arab nations to stand up against Turkey and what they're doing. They are on Haftar's side. They are pro-Russian here, and they are against the Turkish move here in the Mediterranean. And we'll get to more of that, of course, as well. Let's jump over to Syria real quickly. You can see the areas really haven't changed much. Kurds in the yellow. The Turks got that security zone in the top, in the north, in the purple there. The Turkish militias and the Al-Qaeda groups have got the green section there, but the Turkish army has moved down in there as well. The Syrian government, Assad, he's a mafia. He's a mafioso. He's a bad guy. He kills his own people, imprisons them, and slaughters them. There's some reports out here recently that the UN has more evidence that he used chemical weapons on his own people. He's a really bad guy. So they're still trying to hammer this thing out, but it's generally, well, just say this, it's a lot more peaceful than it used to. The most active section in Syria right now is actually in the south. You can see that where that green explosion is in the bottom there, and that star and that blue. Down there in the south, the Assad troops came down in there to squelch, to kill and imprison any rebels down in that section. You may remember that that's exactly where this civil war started. It started at a funeral of an 11-year-old boy there down in southern Syria about 8 years ago now. And now they're still trying to take that area. The rebels just don't want to give up. And the United States still has control of the oil fields in the southern portion of that yellow and up into the northeast. And in fact, there was a report the other day that something like 30 trucks or so, 30 vehicles in a convoy came from Iraq. They're still pouring some reinforcements into that section of the oil fields where Trump says he wants control of them because that's what they're after. I want to suggest to you something here. We're going to talk more about Turkey and oil because that hasn't been really a discussion much in the past. When Gog and Magog and all his troops come down to take spoil, I believe that Turkey, they've never really had oil. They've never had access to it. When the Ottoman Empire was in control, which he misses and he wants back, oil wasn't an issue. But now he understands that this section in the yellow and down into Iraq, in fact, let's just, we'll get there in a second. But that whole area and then down into Libya, that was all under Ottoman control, and the Mediterranean was under Ottoman control. So Putin believes that he owns all that oil and all that gas, and he wants it back. It was sitting underneath his land, and he wants it back. We got to remember, now the Ottoman Empire lasted a long time, but there was somebody there before him, so it depends on who you go back to. According to Iranian analyst Mustafa Nahaji, 53,000 Iranian-backed militia members have merged into the army of dictator Bashar al-Assad. He has lost Assad, the salmon-colored, red-colored people there. The Syrian army has lost a lot of people and decimated their own civilians, and so they really don't have any replacements for these soldiers. So the Iranians are hiring militias to come in and really just, now they're active basically as the Syrian army. And now it looks like about 53,000 of them have come. That's quite a group of men. In Iraq, now this is Iraq, right next door to Syria, and this is a big fight here because Iran wants this area. we really don't know where we stand here. The Parliament of Iraq has said they want the United States out of Iraq. The United States has consolidated some bases and have moved some people out, but we're not out of there yet. In fact, Trump is going to leave on his own time. But there's a fight here because it's interesting. I think the president here is playing both sides. He has he wants security, so he's very, very concerned about Iran. Now remember, and even again, Amir Safadi, if you go watch that, he said it again today, that there's two groups of Shia, really. There's the Iraqi Shia and the Iranian Shia, and they don't see eye to eye. They don't like each other. Then there's the Sunnis, the same boat. There's a bunch of Sunni groups, and they don't like each other. So, but who do they fear most? And so the Shia in Iraq are kind of siding with Iran for now, and trying to kick the United States out. And now they're starting to work with Turkey. Last week, Turkey made a major move in Iraq, about 50 to 60 miles south. You can see these blue dots. These are now either observation posts. Those two to the south are actually Turkish bases that they moved Turkish personnel there to control this area. They're 60 miles, 50 to 60 miles inside Iraqi territory. The Iraqi government wants them out, but they really can't do anything about it. And another problem is Turkey started to work with Iran to bomb the Kurds in the yellow. Because remember, this area right here, now remember there's yellow in Syria and yellow here. It's all Kurds. That's the Kurdish nation. There's a sect of those Kurds called the PKK, and those have been named terrorists even by the United States. They were in Turkey. They still are in Turkey, and the Turks see them as terrorists. But Turkey sees all Kurds as unwanted. And so now they're coming into what's called Kurdistan, and bombing pretty deep into this area. Turkey, I'm telling you, Turkey is getting very brutal. They're getting mean. They're getting extensive, and they're putting their tentacles everywhere. And I call them a hyena. Them and Iran used to be about equal, but Erdogan is a mean guy. So just a couple headlines here. Senior Turkish official told Reuters that Turkey plans to set up more temporary military bases in northern Iraq after stepping up its strikes against PKK. He claims that the effort would ensure border security. Kurdistan takes up northern Iraq, the eastern third of Syria, and about, I would say, 25% of Turkey is Kurdistan and parts of Iran. And Iran wants them out, and the Turks want them out, and Turkey is going to decimate them wherever they are. They see them as a complete threat. In Iraq, 13 pro-Iran fighters arrested for anti-U.S. rocket attacks. So the Iraqi president was pressured into arresting some Iranian or pro-Iranian militias. They went out into the street. They came in force. The Iraqis came in force and took these Iranian fighters, put them in prison, and then I think that night or the next day they were already out. So they're really playing both sides here. There was some rockets launched into the Green Zone. The Green Zone is where the U.S. military is near Baghdad, and it's a dangerous place to be nowadays. Military sources confirmed that nearly 600 armed group militias arrived in Baghdad, coming from the southern province. They want the United States out. What Iran and Iraq, I think all of Iraq in general, some don't, but they want to cause enough problems where the Trump administration says we want out. And do you know what? That's a terrorist group's job, is to terrorize so that people will give up and give in. And they really just want the United States to leave so that they can have control of the Middle East. Early morning today, Iran-backed Kataib Hezbollah militias patrolling the streets of Baghdad, following the arrest of over a dozen members for plotting rocket attacks on Iraqi military bases that house the U.S.-led coalition forces. So they just kept coming after those 13 were arrested. Back to Turkey. When Turkey was under different leadership before 2002, one might have a reasonably considered Ankara as a bulwark against the Iranian expansionism. Today, in contrast, they look more like comrades in arms, engaged in a little friendly competition on the side. This is absolutely phenomenal to read, because when this relationship started some 4 or 5 years ago, maybe you've seen the headlines that we put up, or there's others have put up, strange bedfellows between the Sunni and the Shiites. Turkey and Iran hate each other. And in fact, in Ezekiel 39, their swords are going to turn against each other. But right now, they see the common enemy as the Kurds in the United States and Israel. All three of those are enemies, and so they will stay the fight until they see their work done. But God will see Israel through, of course. With assault on Iraq, Turkey and Iran cement a partnership in crime. The other day, when Turkey moved down there, let me just show you here. Last night's operation, this was last week, last night's operation was the largest ever in Iraq. Turkey took out 81 targets by at least 25 F-16s and an unknown number of drones. By the way, where do they get these F-16s and drones? They get them from the United States, because they're a UN partner, so they've been able to buy it from us, and now they're being used basically against our allies and maybe someday against us. So what happened was, when this happened, these 81 targets happened, Turkey came in mass into northern Iraq and did this, but they coordinated with Iran, and Iran was firing cannons from their border into Kurdistan and killing Kurds as well. So there was a coordinated attack for the first time by this Sunni and Shia partnership. I want to go a little bit deeper here and just remind you of something. This is how devilish this is. This is how satanic this is. According to the Sunni and the Shia, there's no worse enemy than an apostate Muslim. So they both see each other as apostates, and according to the Quran, they must die. Now, for Jews and Christians, we must be subdued, and we must submit to them and pay taxes. If not, we're supposed to die. The whole world is supposed to submit to Islam. In fact, Islam means submit. But for an apostate Muslim, they're supposed to die. And yet now they're working hand in hand against the Kurds and Israel and the United States. So when this bombing took place in northern Iraq, then the refugees hit the road, just like in Syria. And again, Turkey is responsible for displacing hundreds of thousands, if not, well, millions actually, millions of Kurdish people and even other minorities. So it's a horrible thing. What else is Turkey up to? Bet Tagormar, coming down in Magog. What is he up to? This is very important, because again, part of the Ottoman Empire went down along the Red Sea and down next to the Gulf of Aden here. And this is Yemen, a picture of Yemen here. And these three locations here, it's been reported that Turkey is setting up installations at these three locations. Now, who's been fighting here? I'll tell you who's been fighting here. The coalition of Saudi Arabia has been helping the Yemenis people. However, there's a rebel sect there called the Houthis. They're really Iranian rebels. In reality, the Houthis and Iran are in league. And so they've been against Saudi Arabia and the Arab nations there. Now Turkey is moving down into that area. And who are they going to side with? They're going to side with Iran and the Houthis there. And why do they do that? Because first of all, Turkey has the largest army in the Middle East. And they believe that once they take hold here, they're just going to move everybody else out. And everybody's going to be working for them, including Iran. So Iran is just a scapegoat now in some arenas down there. But soon, Turkey is going to be, it's going to be clear that Turkey is the player. By the way, just across the Gulf of Aden there is Somalia. And Turkey's biggest base outside of Turkey is in Somalia. And so in Mogadishu there. And so Turkey is expanding their tentacles in a huge way into Africa and the Middle East. Now here's a Twitter feed, and I know it's hard to see that picture there, and maybe you can't read this, but let me read this. This video was taken. These are some militias working for Turkey, and watch what this guy says. The Islamist militias of the GNA. So that's the blue in Libya there, remember? And they're backed up by some of the European nations, but Turkey is the main player there. The militias of the GNA, as well as Turkey-backed Syrian mercenaries, said they are just getting started, and the target is going to be Gaza. Also, they want to fight al-Sisi in Egypt. And they want to go to Yemen. So we just talked about Yemen. So this guy, knowingly or unknowingly, and I think knowingly, they know what the fight is. They know where their fights are. They know where their friends are. And Turkey is extending their borders into the Ottoman Empire, the old Ottoman Empire. And you can see it takes part of Egypt and Yemen. Gaza is there in Israel, of course. And so it is very widespread. The UN, however, the UN, the progressive deep state left, they select Turkey to be a General Assembly president for the 75th session. So let's just take this guy because he's part of the UN and it's his turn, and let's make him the General Assembly president for the 75th session. And Turkey is the wildest state on the planet right now, and it just absolutely makes no sense whatsoever. But what does on the planet today? Things have changed entirely. More about Turkey. How crazy are they getting? How crazy is this guy Erdogan? This is the largest church of its time, called the Hagia Sophia. In Istanbul. Used to be in Constantinople. It's built by the Byzantines. It's called the Shrine of the Holy Wisdom of God. It's dedicated on behalf of the second person of the Trinity, the Logos. In 1934 or 35, it was turned into, after the Ottoman Empire fell, and after World War I, of course, it was turned into a museum. And it's been a museum forever. However, Erdogan said, we're turning it back into a mosque. And he prayed there just 3 days ago. So they turned it back into a mosque. This was one of the largest tourist attractions in Istanbul. And it's no longer, it's now a mosque. Further on Turkey is Turkey's intrusion into Jerusalem. Look at how bold they are to go up on the Temple Mount there with their flags and their pictures of Erdogan. These people are very aggressive. You may have heard some reports in the past. We've talked about how much money Erdogan is pouring into Jerusalem to open up one of the gates there to make a little mosque on the other side of the Temple Mount there, and to get their people fired up about taking Jerusalem back. Now, it's really interesting here because Alaska, we'll get that in a second, Alaska Mosque is on top of here by the Dome of the Rock, and he said that he wants to free that. He wants to free the Dome of the Rock and get it back, get this whole area back into Arab hands. And yet, you know, this was like their fourth holiest place or something like that. And the Quds forces, which comes out of Iran, they want to free Jerusalem as well in the Temple Mount, but they don't even have a holy site on the Temple Mount. So it's a very satanic idea. So you remember the corridor that Turkey and Libya, the Libyan government, signed, not Haftar's group. So the GNA, the western side, the blue side, signed this agreement with Turkey to make a corridor where they will both agree that this is our corridor, this is where you can't cross, ships can't cross, pipelines can't cross. We're going to do our exploration here, and Turkey has freedom all along that corridor. Well, just in the last couple of weeks, Turkey again is extending this corridor. They're trying to extend it further into Greek waters, and also they've been threatening this Cyprus over there as well. So again, Turkey is pushing their agenda here, and it was right along that area here where this corridor is that he set up all those ships when they had that massive exercise. So he is really trying to show his oomph. Turkey vows to liberate Alaska. So that's the one, that's the other dome. There's two domes on the Temple Mount. That's the other dome. He wants to liberate her as well as the Hagia Sophia that he just liberated in his mind. So he is a bad guy. Let's move on to just Putin real quick. The latest Russian public referendum allows Putin to seek 2 more 6-year terms after his present one ends in 2024. So he is going to be allowed to stay in power till 2036 when he is 83 years old. He remains the active power in the UN and the Middle East. He's a guard over even Turkey, over Iran, over some of these other players, and we're going to see how this all plays out. Let's go to Iran just a little bit. A couple months ago, this picture was taken from above. This is a replica of a United States aircraft carrier, and they were going to use this for bombing. Iran's going to use this for bombing, so it's again supposed to scare us, and the United States said, you know, we're ready for all this. Just real briefly about Iran, besides them pouring militias and doing all this other stuff, they are in dire straits as far as money is concerned. But in the last couple of weeks, there has been about a dozen now bombings, terrorist acts of some kind in and around Tehran and south of Tehran, on their missile production, on their uranium and nuclear production. Here's one of the pictures of it bombed. Nobody really knows who did it. Most suggest that it's probably Israeli and United States coalition combined here. I believe that's probably the case. There are some reports that there are some groups in Iran now working with Israel because they are devastated as far as the COVID virus is concerned for their economy, the sanctions that Trump has put on them and is not releasing, and there's still more of them coming. So Iran's economy is being devastated, and now all these bombings, and it's looking really bad for Iran. What are they going to do? Are they going to continue? They've just revealed in their past history, their recent history, they're going to continue to ramp this thing up. They're not going to back down. They're not giving in. They're going full board with their corridor to the Mediterranean and to destroy Israel. So we're just going to have to continue to wait and sea. So that's the update as far as Gog and Magog. We'll talk a little bit about Israel here, which is involved as well. But we want to get into some other general news, which is pretty interesting, and we'll try to go through this fairly quickly. The Vatican summons the United States and Israeli envoys over annexation. You remember now that Israel wants to annex the West Bank, okay? And here's Boris Johnson saying, I'm not going to recognize those lines if they don't. We're going to recognize the 67 lines. So you see the orange there on the West Bank, the orange there that goes down through the Jordan Valley as well. Parts of that, big sections of that, Israel wants to annex. Now let me show you a picture of why this is so important. You can see where it says hill country there, right in the middle of your picture. And then just to the right of that is Jerusalem. Those are the highest sections. The main highway, the King's Highway they call it, is right along that hill. And you go over a little bit to the Olivet, Mount of Olivet, and then all of a sudden it just drops hundreds of feet. And from that hillside, from that hilltop, in fact, that's where, by the way, that's where Abraham went. He would look down and saw the valley below him when he was looking at Sodom and Gomorrah down there at the Dead Sea. From there, you can see all the way down, all along that valley, and then over to Jordan. So if you have the heights, if you have the West Bank, you have three things. Well, two really. You just have water and security. What I mean by security, you have the highest tops. You can put all your guns. You have all your radars. You can see everything. And the water, there are water tables up on top of that mountain as well that are important for the security of Israel. Now remember, Israel wants to share with all of their citizens, their Arab citizens as well as their own. But they have to have that hilltop for their complete security of the Jordan Valley and all along that area. They have it to the coast in general. Gaza is a problem, and north is a problem, but in general, if they can get the West Bank, they're going to have a ton of security, and that's what they're looking for there. That has to do with Israel. Just a few more things. I thought this was interesting. This was made up. Person of the year is Mayhem. So a little bit about earthquakes, just fairly steady. General earthquakes, 4 to 5s in the Middle East. Steady though. See where they run from east to west, just that area? They've been almost every day earthquakes across Iran and Turkey and into Afghanistan and Pakistan every single day. In the tropical system, we had our first hurricane, Dolly. She was number 6. She was the 6th tropical system of this season. She was the earliest 6th. So in other words, we're already setting records about tropical systems. We already had this one, and she's already faded out and gone. Last week we had 3 in a row out in the Pacific. And so ramping up very quickly. And in fact, before these came out, or right about when these came out, there was another report. All these universities, Colorado and others, and the National Weather Service, they put out these predictions, and they keep ramping up these predictions. 20 named storms are predicted, the most since 2005. The locust situation, which we try to keep you up with a little bit. It's hard to do. 13 countries are affected by the locust situation, and it's devastating in Africa, especially East Africa and Southeast Africa, Pakistan, coming into India and other places, so it's not good there. You know what's happening in the United States. Cuomo here said, show me where it says protests are supposed to be peaceful. And it's under the First Amendment. The First Amendment says we have the right to gather. It's the only one that really sets a limit. The right of the people to peacefully assemble. So it's right there in the Constitution. And how he got his position at CNN, well, we all know. It's very interesting. What happened, the Congress went and took a knee, and they're dressed in that African garb for whatever reason. And they took a knee for 8 minutes and 46 seconds, which, you know, is infamous now. So let's go into a little bit of the church and the decline of our nation. And actually, this is one of the world. The rising acceptance of homosexuality by people in countries around the world. You can just continue to see them. All the numbers go up. In 2002, it was 51% in the United States, and now it's 72%. And you can see the rest of them. The UK and Canada are 85, 86%. Even Japan, which is very, very conservative, is up to 68%. So it's a bad deal. Now, in 2003, the justices issued a ruling legalizing homosexuality, and then 12 years later, you remember the Marriage Equality Act, and now in June 2020, the Civil Rights Act protecting gays and transgenders. Now, this is really where it gets strange for me, because the conservatives, even some of the conservatives on the court, said that because of the Civil Rights Act, that businesses can't fire somebody over their sin, their desire to be married to the same sex, or something to that effect. What's really interesting here is this, to me, this really demeans the Civil Rights Act. Because the Civil Rights Act was to make us equal in race and gender and those kinds of things. And now to throw something in there that has anything to do with sexual orientation, you know, this fake love and all that stuff, is absolutely wrong and disastrous. In fact, James Dobson says, we will pay the price. The decision by the U.S. Supreme Court this week to redefine sex in the 1964 Civil Rights Act to include special accommodations for transgenders and homosexuals is an affront to God. So it's interesting. See, they used the Civil Rights Act saying, because it mentions sex and gender, then we need to look out for the promiscuity, or the likes and however you want to put that these people have for each other. That's not what the Civil Rights Act meant. It meant if you're a woman, we're not going to discriminate you against being hired or fired here. It had to do with their biology. So it's a very, very sad thing. Another sad thing is the Southern Baptists see the biggest drop in 100 years. Now we're really getting to see the changes here in some of the conservative churches. The loss of 288,000 church members last year brings the total SBC membership to 14,500,000, down from its peak of 16.3 in 2006. Let's see. Let's just get to baptisms fell. Several conventions experienced double-digit growth. Iowa grew. Minnesota, Wisconsin, Colorado, Utah, and Washington and Oregon grew. And then in Iowa and Hawaii, they also saw membership growth by more than 20%. So there's some growth in some regions, but in general, the Southern Baptists have lost a lot of people. California continues their rage against Christianity, and they banned singing, I think last week or so, in churches because of the spread of the virus, which is, that's gone way too far. They had gone way too far before by closing churches, but that was way too far. And then Don Lemon says that Jesus Christ admittedly was not perfect when he was here. And he was talking to his friend Cuomo there, and and Cuomo was shaking his hand, who's supposed to be a Catholic, and he agreed with Don Lemon, and I think they're going to find out that they're absolutely wrong. Going beyond the LGBT thing, Somerville, Massachusetts recognizes polyamory, which is a relationship between three or more adults. And so basically you're getting to the point where you can kind of marry and be with whoever and how many ever you want. So it's a really horrible thing. We're going to finish up here in just a minute here. But this has been troubling to me. I've been trying to correspond with a gentleman from Jerusalem, Israel. He's very conservative, but he's not Christian. But he took a stance against evangelicals and Christianity in Israel. And about 2 months ago or so, they had this huge discussion about stopping evangelism and proselytizing of Jews in Israel. And finally, Israel said, well, we've had enough of God TV, and they kicked them out of Israel. So this is a sign of things to come. It's a persecution of Christianity, but now it's a persecution of Christianity by Jews themselves and the Jewish nation. So I thought that was very telling. The parliament in Iran has passed another law, and a very generalized law to where they can just, if you're a threat, we can throw you in prison, and it's targeted at Christians in particular. But whoever is a threat now or seen as a cult in Iran can be thrown into prison. Lots of deaths continue in Africa, especially Nigeria, Chad, some others, by Boko Haram and by Fulani and others. 620 Christians were killed by Fulani and 150 by Boko Haram just from January to mid-May 2020. So it's Christianity has taken a real death toll now in Africa as it did in the Middle East. It's continuing to spread because Islam is getting tougher and tougher. China continues their march onto the churches and crushing the churches across their nation as they can. They removed the crosses from 250 churches in a single province. So they're really going after churches in a big way. They were really just just demolishing the bigger ones. Then they were demolishing the ones that would not sign up their people with the state, and now they're just taking them down basically altogether. This guy claims to be the Messiah. He's Man-hee Lee in South Korea, and he's talking about the second coming. It's really interesting because he's talking about the second coming of himself, I guess, maybe. And they have 200,000 members. And so you remember South Korea was actually the largest growing church for a long time. And they started sending out lots of missionaries. Now this guy is taking a hold in South Korea. A couple more slides here. This gentleman is an Atlantic pastor, Louis Giglio. And he said this: we understand the curse that was slavery. White people do. We miss the blessing of slavery. That it actually built up the framework for the world that white people live in. Now, he's a sense apologized. He says, I'm sorry. And I understand that. But see how we're being drug into this? And we need to be very cautious about the stance that we take on this kind of stuff. And this is ridiculous. We have an associate pastor here, Joe Mason, and he and I talk about this stuff a lot. And he's a history buff. In fact, he's a history teacher. And he made it very clear, it's very clear, that really the South, because they were the central part of slavery and for decades after, really never recovered from it, because it was a curse, really, on white man. It was really a curse on the United States. The Civil War was a disaster. So slavery was really a curse. It was really never a blessing. It really, honestly, never did build up the United States. It might have made some people rich, but it didn't build us up. It actually cursed us, and we're living with that curse even today. This young man, Sean King, tried to start a church in Atlanta. Took for a little while, a few hundred people went there, but recently said, yes, I think the statues of the white European they claim is Jesus should also come down. They are a form of white supremacy. Always have been. In the Bible, when the family of Jesus wanted to hide and blend in, guess where they went? Egypt, not Denmark. Well, first of all, there was no Denmark, so let's get that clear. And second of all, that's where they were supposed to go because the Lord wanted them to go to Egypt. And he is just taking this totally out of context and really is not properly using Scripture for the good of the name of Christ. This is another picture of somebody who's being drawn into this social gospel to try to make things nice and equal for everybody. And that means pulling the big white man down to his knees and apologizing for our sins. So that's what's happening here, and everybody's getting caught up in it. And finally, Instagram brands Christian worship as harmful. Folks, we are in a different time. It's been a while since I've done an update, and now you know why. There's so much news to discuss and get into, and I apologize if I didn't get into some of those things more than I should have. Email me or whatever, but I want you to look into these things because we're seeing all of this stuff come together, and I think I mentioned to you before that I'm looking for something to say. This is not the summer. This is not the time that Christ talked about. Jesus said, when you see all these things, look up. And he said, you know that summer is near when you see these things. And so we see these things coming, and especially the Magog war in this chess match. And it's interesting. It's encouraging to know that Jesus Christ is close. But I'm concerned for the church. I'm concerned for you. I want you to be encouraged in the Lord and stay close to each other. Gather together and talk through these things. I think the most important thing going forward is to be knowledgeable about what the Bible says is coming, because then you won't be caught off guard. You won't be afraid. You will be able to stand up and say, I know these things were coming because Jesus said himself. And they're not catching me by surprise. Am I concerned? Yes. Am I afraid? No. I want to talk to you about the Lord and how to receive him and how we can be in the eternity together. Because that's the end game. That's what the Lord is after, is our eternity with him. So stay encouraged and stay close to each other. Find another Christian who believes in the same thing. A good church, a good Bible-believing church. And you have my email address. Look up our website at redeemingracebc.org. And you'll find my information there. We love you, and stay encouraged.